My name is Lauren Weinbaum, and I'm 37 years old. I'm a mother of 2 little children, Miles and Livy. Miles is 3, Livy is 4, and I was recently diagnosed with an incredibly rare adenoma tumor of the middle ear. And my hope in publishing this video is that when I was diagnosed with this particular type of super rare tumor, there's almost no information on the internet. So I want to raise awareness and hopefully help someone else see that I can come through on the other side, and you can too, of surviving this diagnosis. So on March 19 of 2020, the Safer at Home went into effect. My husband and I are both in construction management, and we were uncertain of our future, but actually what ended up happening was we worked more than ever. When the government deemed that construction management companies were essential businesses, we worked what felt like was around the clock, trying to understand COVID-19 and try to deal with the implications of the business. I own a small construction management, women-owned business in Los Angeles, California. And luckily for myself, my family, and my employees, all of our work continued during the pandemic. So I was incredibly busy, and this is relevant because I had started to notice when I was making dinner at night for my family that I was slightly dizzy. And I somewhat ignored it, mostly because I was so busy and it really wasn't impacting my life that much. So I casually mentioned that I had been slightly dizzy to my mother, who's a retired registered nurse in the state of Illinois. And she said, "Lauren, that sounds like something with your middle ear. I think you should get that checked out." So I did what every child does, and I ignored the words of my mother. On June 19th, we celebrated my son's 3rd birthday. That evening, I received a call from my mother that my grandfather had passed away, and I was going to have to fly during the pandemic to the state of Illinois for his services. So when I got on the airplane, I had my N95 mask on, I had my goggles on, I plugged in my Apple earpods. I went to adjust my N95 mask, and my right earpod flew to the back of the plane. And we had already taken off. So I had 4 hours with only my left earpod in, and my iPhone that I downloaded 2 videos to watch with. I was sort of excited for some quiet time. What I noticed during that 4-hour flight is that I had my volume all the way up on my iPhone, and I was hardly hearing out of my left ear. So on July 5th, I went to the Breathe Clear Institute in Torrance, California, a well-known ENT, and I wasn't really concerned, but I went to the ENT. I said I had been slightly dizzy. The nurse practitioner looked in both of my ears. She told me my right ear looked normal. And when she got to my left ear, she just went, So they take pictures of it. They show me a picture of my eardrum, and she explained it to me that it looked like my eardrum was lying on its side out of my left ear, and it appeared to be a pretty significant ear infection. So she sent me home with a 3-day antibiotic, and she told me she would call me that evening after she talked to the doctor about my diagnosis. So she called me around 7 o'clock that night, and she said, "The doctor and I believe you have an effusion of your left ear, which in simple terms is just an incredibly bad ear infection. But we are a little concerned that you went on an airplane and you've been walking around and you don't feel any pain with this bad of an ear infection. So we think something's wrong with your station 2. So we need to see you back 2 weeks later on July 15th, and we're going to do an audiogram and test your hearing, and then we're going to do a follow-up and look in your ear." So I returned on July 15th to the same office, Breathe Clear Institute, and I got my hearing test. And I was in this little box, and I'm wearing a mask, and the audiologist is wearing a mask, and there's a series of beeping. And I can tell the way that he's looking at me. He's looking down at the script, and then he's looking at me. I could tell I was absolutely failing my hearing test in my left ear. And at that point in time, I started to get anxiety. Like, I have no pain. I started to become overly concerned. So I come out of that little booth, And the audiologist sits me down and he says, so you have hearing loss in your left ear. Your right ear is slightly lower than normal, but you're good. And the hearing loss appears to be conductive. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, it means that there's something that's in your middle ear, and it could just be this really bad ear infection that's blocking the vibration. So what I learned is you've got your outer ear, which is the ear that we see. Then there's your middle ear, which takes you inside. Then there's your inner ear, which is lodged inside of your brain. So 3 components of the ear. So I go back to, after I completed the hearing test, I go right next door back to see my ENT. They look in my ear again, and the effusion, the ear infection, has decreased, but they can't explain why I have hearing loss. So they say, listen, we need to do one more follow-up. We're going to do this procedure called a myringotomy, where they drill a hole in your eardrum, just to make sure there's no infection, because when you look in an ear, you see one side of the eardrum. But if you get a significant ear infection, it can be on the other side of the eardrum, which you can't see. A regular doctor can't see that. Okay, so now they're starting to think maybe there's still an ear infection, but on the other side of the eardrum we can't see. So I leave that appointment and I go, it was around lunchtime, and I had plans from Torrance drive and meet my husband in Redondo Beach for lunch. So I'm driving south on Pacific Coast Highway, minding my own business, and a parked car ends up in my lane. I have a terrible car accident. Not caused by me. I was sort of concerned because I had been dizzy, but she was parked. I had the right of way. She throws me in the center lane. She hits another car. My car is totaled. Her car is totaled. I'll explain later why this car accident becomes relevant. So on July 15th, I go home. I think I'm fine. I've just survived a really bad car accident. I go to my workout class that night. I've been doing a really intensive workout with 2 of my friends. And by the time the weekend comes, a few days later, I am become confined to my bed. My mattress is spinning in circles, almost like I've had a night out and I've had too much to drink. I hadn't had any alcohol at all, and the mattress was spinning so bad. Now, in the car accident, I didn't hit my head. The airbags didn't deploy. Everything was kind of at a perfect angle for my car to be totaled, and I thought I was fine from the car accident. So the dizziness, I ended up calling, it was on a Saturday, I ended up calling the ENT hotline. I thought it was something to do with my ear infection. So the ENT that I called on the phone explained to me the difference between vertigo and dizziness, which I was unaware. Vertigo is defined as spinning. Dizziness is defined as sort of an out of body and just kind of feeling out of sorts. So the ENT told me on the phone, your vertigo doesn't have anything to do with your ear, but your dizziness does. So also that weekend, when I woke up from sleep, the left side of my face started spasming uncontrollably, shaking on the left side of my face. I walked into the kitchen because I wanted my husband to witness it. So I let the on-call ENT know that I was having facial spasms. And they said, well, yeah, that could be because the facial nerves run from your brain all the way down through your middle ear here. Everything runs through your middle ear. So that could be a result of what's going on with your ear. So that next week, I was convinced the reason I was feeling so poorly was because of my ear. I called my ENT's office every single day. I said, I'm absolutely miserable. I run a business. I have 2 little kids. I'm unable to work because I'm so physically ill from this dizziness and vertigo. So they gave me a prescription for vertigo, and they gave me a steroid. I never really got better. I went to their office. This was the turning point of everything, where things started to get really, really scary. I went to their office for a routine myringotomy. The doctor pulls out some sort of drill to drill a hole in my eardrum. And then I feel a vacuum type suction, which I believe was they were trying to vacuum out the infection of my eardrum. And he stops the procedure short and he looks at me and he said, Lauren, I'm really sorry to inform you, but this myringotomy, you don't have an ear infection. Behind your eardrum, we found a soft tissue mass. And unfortunately, we're going to have to send you for an MRI of your brain and your middle ear to see what's going on. He's like, I no longer can help you. And I'm going to send you to 2 specific types of doctors. One is called an otoneurologist, which is basically to do with tumors of the nerve of the middle ear, and an otolaryngologist, which is an ENT on steroids, basically, just a highly specialized doctor. So I start crying immediately because the first thing that comes to my mind is I think it is some sort of tumor, and I can tell the doctor thinks that as well. And I say, listen, I have 2 little kids. What does this mean for my life? I'm really scared right now. And he said to me, the odds are with you. The likelihood that it is a tumor is less than 1%, but there is a type of acoustic neuroma, which is a benign brain tumor of the ear. And there's something else called a cholesteatoma, which is a cyst that develops in the ear. And the most important thing that he said to me was, Lauren, this isn't going to be a quantity of life issue for you. It's not going to kill you. This is going to be a quality of life issue for you. And that has ended up being true to this day. So after I left that appointment, I scheduled the MRI, but I was really scared because they're talking to me about my brain. And the middle ear is right next door. There's a thin layer of bone to your brain. So I schedule the MRI as soon as I can. They put it on a rush because they're concerned, I'm concerned. And I go and get the MRI, and they call me with the results right away, the radiologist, and they say, the good news is your brain is clear, but we found a mass in your middle ear, and it looks like a cholesteatoma, which again is the cyst of the middle ear. But I noticed when I read the radiology report, it said other tumors unlikely. So they were still concerned because an MRI looks at muscle, which I've now learned. A CT scan looks at bone. They said we need to do a CT scan to look at your bone because we're still not exactly sure what we're seeing. So they did a CT scan to look at my bone, and what they found was very unusual. So I had this mass that was in my middle ear. A lot of my bone surrounding my middle ear had disappeared. It was just gone. My facial nerve and my taste bud nerve were basically just floating freely, which they're not supposed to be. So I got a bunch more, So I finally get in, after all of this, to see Dr. Doherty at USC Keck. Because of the pandemic, all the hours are restricted, and my situation wasn't deemed a medical emergency. So when I see Dr. Doherty, it was an in-person appointment. She reviewed my CT scan and my MRI scan, and she walked in the room and she said, I think you have a cholesteatoma. Okay, so what does that mean, Dr. Doherty? Well, it's a cyst of the middle ear, and we're going to make an incision and we're going to remove it. It has caused a lot of damage to your middle ear. She's like, but there's something that's bothering me. She says, normally when you get a myringotomy, which remember was when they drilled a hole in my eardrum, if it's a pus-filled sac, a cholesteatoma will want to spew out during this process. The fact that this mass didn't move is really concerning to me. So she says to me, I'm really concerned that you have a facial nerve schwannoma. I said, okay, so what does that mean? She said, it's a tumor that's attached to your facial nerve. I said, okay, so what's the treatment for that? And she said, well, the prognosis isn't great because we can't surgically remove the tumor. without paralyzing the left side of your face. And if we paralyze the left side of your face, there's a scale of paralysis. And it goes all the way up to 6. And with plastic surgery, we can get you back to a 3, which will mean that physically at rest, you'll look normal. But when you try to speak, your face, the best we can get with plastic surgery, if we remove this tumor, is grade 3, which means you'll have trouble blinking. When you eat, you'll drool. So it's not just the cosmetic fact of... The other thing was, they basically, with a facial nerve schwannoma tumor, they treat it with radiation to keep the tumor as small as possible until it finally grows large enough that it severs the facial nerve and you become paralyzed. So I was pretty upset. I started crying again in her office, and I said, so a cholesteatoma is a better diagnosis? And she said, absolutely. She's like, but I'm still not convinced it is this, so I'm going to send you to a vestibular doctor to get your balance evaluated. You're going to do a 3-hour evaluation of your balance, because I'm still not convinced it's a cholesteatoma. I'm still not convinced it's a facial nerve schwannoma. It just doesn't fully fit into any of those boxes. Then she told me, she said, at USC Keck, when we have these cases that we can't figure out, we meet, there's a team of 6 doctors. It's composed of 2 radiologists, 2 neurologists, and 2 otolaryngologists. And one of the doctors on that team is a doctor named Dr. Go, and he's famous for middle ear tumors. She assured me, she goes, whatever he says it is, it's gonna be. So the next day after I had my appointment with Dr. Doherty, who thought it was a facial nerve schwannoma, I get in quickly to see this vestibular therapist, because what this vestibular therapist is trying to rule out, your cochlea and your middle ear are responsible for balance. And remember, I had been dizzy and I'd had severe vertigo. So some of these tumors will actually completely eat, for lack of a better term, your balance organ. And what happens is you have a balance organ in your right middle ear and you have a balance organ in your left middle ear. So if a tumor takes out one balance organ, your body will adjust and defer to the other balance organ. So I had a 3-hour balance evaluation, and that is, I sat on a chair and spun in a circle until I was dizzy. They moved me upside down and back upright repeatedly, and they would ask me a series of questions. They would look in my eye, and then they would look in my ear. After I completed that vestibular evaluation, they decided that they really didn't feel that I had any type of tumor that was attached to my balance organ and had caused damage to my balance organ. So that was good news. So that evening, when I arrived home, because remember, Dr. Doherty told me this famous radiologist, Dr. Go, was going to read my head scans, she called me and she said, I have good news for you. Okay? Dr. Go and we all believe it's an adenoma tumor of the middle ear. And remember, no one had talked to me about an adenoma tumor of the middle ear. I said, well, what does that mean? Well, it's believed to be benign, because adenoma tumors in general are benign, but it's incredibly rare. In fact, we haven't had a case in the United States that we're aware of in 5 years. There's less than 100 cases of middle ear adenoma tumors ever. And I said, okay, so what is the treatment? And she said, we will go in and remove the tumor. As long as it's not attached to the facial nerve, we will go in surgically and we will remove the tumor. And then after we remove the tumor, we're going to follow you. You're only going to be my patient. Like, I don't get to go to regular ENT anymore. If I have a cold or a sinus infection, I go straight to an otolaryngologist for the next 10 years. I get a scan every 6 months. So on September 14th, during a global pandemic, I went in for a very specialized surgery of a very special tumor. Hey guys, it's the night before my big ear surgery to remove what they believe is an adenoma tumor of the middle ear. So I have to report to USC Kent tomorrow at 5:30 a.m. and I'm the first surgery of the day, supposed to be at 7:30 in the morning. And the surgery's supposed to take 3 hours, they told me, and that's if all goes well. There still is a concern that the tumor is not the type of tumor that they thought it was, and that it's going to be resting on my facial nerve. Not resting, actually, attached to my facial nerve. And so what the surgeon said is once they go in through the back of my ear, and they open it up, and then they go through and they take a drill through my mastoid bone, which is right here. And once they get to my middle ear, then they take a biopsy right away. And they call it a frozen biopsy, and it'll tell within 30 minutes. It'll tell the surgeon if it's benign or malignant. Everyone expects it to be benign. And then also they hook some electrodes up to the tumor, and they shock it. And what they hope happens is that none of the surrounding nerves respond, like the facial nerve or the taste bud nerve, which is all right there. If that's the case, that means the tumor isn't attached to anything and they can pull it out. If the tumor is attached to the facial nerve, it means it's a schwannoma tumor, which is a tumor that originates from the nerve, and they will not remove it. At this time, it would paralyze my face, the complete left side of my face instantly. So they will not remove it, and they will sew me back up. So fingers crossed that it's able to be removed, that it's benign like everyone thinks, and I'm on my way to recovery and a treatment plan. I'm feeling very nervous and scared. I don't remember this will be my 13th surgery, and I don't remember being this nervous before. I think the fact that it is so rare is what's really got me so freaked out. And no one's telling me ever that, especially since they caught it, that it's going to be life-threatening. But I think I'm just so nervous that the rarity of it means that it's going to be more dangerous. My surgeon's Dr. Doherty, out of USC Keck Hospital, and she's one of 100 surgeons in the entire United States that can do this procedure. And she, in 25 years, has only taken out one adenoma tumor. So the good news is that she's taken out one, and that person is still with us. Anyway, wish me luck. I will keep you guys posted on moving forward. The only thing that was unexpected of this tumor remover is that, to their surprise, the tumor originated from my eardrum. So during the surgery, they had to cut apart my eardrum, and she used adjacent cartilage to rebuild my eardrum. So as I sit here today towards the end of October, I still don't know, and I won't know until my November follow-up appointment, how much hearing loss I have. I can tell that it's gradually coming back, but I'm not really sure how much is back. I really want to close this video out with some final talking points. Number one is this car accident and the fact that I got a concussion and got vertigo, I truly believed helped discover this adenoma tumor, because I thought it was to do with my ear and I forced them to listen. Number two is pay attention to your own body and what's normal for you. It came out after my tumor was removed that I've had this tumor for 5 years. And thinking back, I have every year gone and got a physical for the past 5 years. My oldest daughter is going to be 5. And I kept telling my internist, I really just don't feel that well. But he kept chalking it up to, You own your own business. You have 2 little kids, 18 months apart. You're just a busy working mom. But I really wasn't feeling that well. And I think the other thing the final thing to remain calm that I wasn't the greatest at is that I spent a lot of time panicking and worrying, and I caused myself a lot of anxiety. And my story is going to end up being fine. And even with my worst diagnosis, there really is a treatment for almost anything, but you do have to stay on top of the doctors, on top of your medical records, and on top of your follow-ups. And I want to thank you all for listening to my story. I do really appreciate all the viewers that have tuned in, even if you just know me personally, or you Googled this diagnosis and came across it. I hope that it helps you in some way, because that is my whole goal, is to help someone else through this time.